Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Montreal, Canada on February 13th, 2026. It is, in fact, Friday the 13th. We're going to try to avoid any bad luck today. And no better way to do that than to have back onto the show our friend, Margaret Kimberly. Margaret, I'm sure, will be known to many people in our audience already. In case you haven't heard of her excellent work before, she's the executive editor and senior columnist of Black Agenda Report and the current host of the Black Agenda Radio podcast. And her wonderful book, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents, was published in 2020. Thank you for joining us again today, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's President's Month. We just had Lincoln's birthday and President's Day coming up on Monday. So it's a perfect time to read a book about presidential history by reading Prejudential. Thanks again. It's good to be back.
Why don't you just give us a quick synopsis of the book? What is the main topic theme? Obviously, it has something to do with U.S. presidents, but what is the perspective that the book conveys?
I stop with Trump 45, so I'm behind two presidents now. I'm going to have to update it. But I go president by president, detailing the history of Black people in the U.S. And the treatment of and relationships with each president. The first presidents were almost all slaveholders, 12 of the first 14 presidents, which tells you a lot about U.S. history. I break down how even the allegedly good for Black people presidents were not. So I go back to the foundation of the country, and slaveholding was a huge part of that history. Made the U.S. An economic power, determined many things that aren't talked about, still are not talked about. But racism against Black people is a foundation of U.S. politics, and that continues to this day, even with the first Black president, Barack Obama. So it's a great book.
And as I'm sure you know all too well, genocide is also a foundation of U.S. politics. That, too, is something that gets talked about too little in the corporate media.
Oh, absolutely. It's we have Indian names, place names, and nobody talks about, you just sort of accept it. The Thanksgiving holiday, which is highly problematic. The idea that this country is a quote unquote white country and English is the first language, and all of these things are a normalization of erasure of the First Nations, the first inhabitants of this country, who were the goal was to wipe them out, which did not happen, by the way. And we also have to say, Indigenous people are not a dead people; they're very much with us. And the bringing of enslaved Africans here to kill people off, to take their land, to bring in enslaved people, to get their free labor. All of those things are still very much with us in many ways.
Indeed, and I think we're probably going to end up exposing some of that today. We're going to focus latter parts of our discussion on current events, events that have enormous potential to exacerbate human suffering in this world. But before we get into it, I want to just remind people, if you find this video to be informative, please like and share it. And if you're not already a subscriber, please become one and help us expand the reach of our unapologetic brand of resistance journalism. So with that, Margaret, I'd like to talk to you about the seventh trip of the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington since Trump came back to the White House in January of last year. It kind of feels like deja vu all over again, Margaret, because we're hearing reports about divisions between Trump and Netanyahu in the lead up to what is may well be a devastating war. And I'm just going to show you and our audience here one such report. The flavor of this report is, Netanyahu came to Washington with intelligence about Iran's ballistic missile program, and he was definitely trying to persuade the president to launch another attack, apparently one that would be much more devastating in its nature and scope. And the president insisted that Iran talks must continue without stipulating that the ballistic missile program of Iran must be on the table in those talks. So I'm curious to know, Margaret, what is your assessment of what actually happened in this meeting? Where do you think this is all heading?
Well, it's so funny. This idea that Trump has to be convinced to attack Iran. I mean, just all we have to do is look back at his first administration. Um, the attempt to, first of all, let's go. I'll go back to Obama, and Obama had begun, who I never give credit for any reason, but anyway, I have to sort of give him credit in order to discuss this issue. He had begun the process of normalizing relations with Iran, the so-called Iran deal, which ended or I don't know if ended U.S. sanctions, but gave Iran a lot of relief. At any rate, this agreement with the other permanent members of the Security Council. And it was a huge change in U.S.-Iranian relations, which had been nothing but hostile for decades. Trump comes in, gets out of the treaty. Well, actually, it wasn't a treaty. It was an agreement, let's call it. Biden continues what Trump did. And during the first Trump administration, the U.S. assassinated General Soleimani. So this has been a part of U.S. foreign policy for a very long time, this hostility to Iran. It's not just Israel trying to convince American presidents to be hostile towards Iran. Iran has oil. Iran is strategically located. Iran is dedicated, and I just learned that it's a constitutional obligation to defend the Palestinian people. Iran is a military power, and a regime change operation against Iran is in the interests of Israel and the U.S. So Netanyahu wants this very badly, as you point out. He's become like a resident of Washington. As much as of Israel. There was, they call it the 12-day war of some months ago. There was an effort to have a decapitation strike. It did succeed somewhat. They could not, Israel does, they do this to Palestinians. They do it to Hezbollah and Lebanon, murdering leaders to try and get their movements or political organizations to fall apart. They partly succeeded in Iran. The Iranians did regroup and have been preparing for months for another attack. The recent unrest, it's funny to me, the U.S. keeps admitting it. The U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, he goes to Congress and says, well, yeah, we had a role in causing this economic problem in Iran. He says it all the time. And then there's this actual question about the U.S. role. Of course, we're told the Iranian people, they hate their government. The government killed all these people. But the U.S. and Israel have operatives in Iran disrupting the society. Iranians are not going to attack their own mosques. They're not going to kill their own police. So these are U.S. and Israeli agents who they work with. The New York Times may say, I'm sure you saw this, that a ragtag group had a Starlink system. A ragtag and Starlink? No, that's the U.S. and Israel establishing a Starlink system, which fortunately the Iranians were able to disrupt. But since that time, as I said, Iran has improved its defense capabilities. It was smart for them to cut off internet because the people trying to overthrow their government were using it against them. So now they want another military attack. The U.S. goes through this charade in order to get public buy-in. Well, we tried to talk to Iran, and we know they've got nukes. That's all a lie, of course. And so we have to attack them because we tried to talk to them, but these quote unquote talks are just, it's a ruse. to give deniability to a U.S. attack. So Trump wants to attack Iran. There are powerful forces in Congress and the Senate who also want to attack Iran. But Iran is also now getting more help from Russia and from China. And so attacking Iran now is a different story altogether. So apparently there's more hesitancy about doing what the U.S. really does want to do. So Netanyahu shows up just to make sure, in case anybody's got cold feet, that the U.S. will go through what Israel wants.
Now, you talked a little bit about the opinions of the Iranian people. I just want to share with our audience some footage from massive demonstrations that were held in Iran just 2 days ago, commemorating the Islamic Revolution. And this is footage posted by DD Geopolitics on X. So let's have a look at what the footage shows. So, Margaret, by the way, that image of people walking on the Israeli and American flag reminded me when I was in South Lebanon last time, near the Israeli border, in Bint Jbeil. They'd actually painted an Israeli flag onto a street. It had been there for years, where a pedestrian crosswalk. So this is not confined to Iran, I assure you. In any case, Margaret, people, when they talk about in the West and the corporate media, when they and the Islamic Revolution, they put the emphasis on Islamic, the part, and then they say, well, this is all a fundamentalist, mullah extremist regime and so forth. But what they try to ignore or downplay is the revolution part. Could you talk to us a little bit about what it was the Iranian people were rebelling against, and why to this very day this resonates with people, particularly at a time when they're being threatened again by the United States?
Well, the revolution part was revolting against a government that had been put in place by the U.S. Iranians had elected a president in the early 50s, President Mossadegh, and he was overthrown by Britain and the U.S., undoing the will of the people. They placed the Shah of Iran there, who ruled for about 25 years, I think. That was not the government of their choosing. They want sovereignty. They want self-determination. They want to choose their political leaders, and their effort at independence and democracy was undone by the West. And now they have a government of their choosing. And, it's a funny thing how when the U.S. state doesn't like a country, well, they lie, and the corporate media work with them. But Iran has a democracy. Their system is different from ours. They have a presidential election. Religious leaders do play a role. But it's funny to me how little democracy we have in the U.S., with rich people deciding who we can and can't vote for. I don't know how anybody here is judging anybody else's political system anyway, but they also they use their oil wealth to benefit their people. Imagine that. But that's not what the U.S. wants. They are, and as I said, they are dedicated to being in solidarity with Palestine. That is something that the U.S. and Israel cannot abide. Now, there also was, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off topic, but Iran and Saudi Arabia, just across the water from each other, were enemies. But now they have established a working relationship. This is something that also frightens Israel and the US. The Gulf Arab states play a role of being friendly with the US and Israel. And it's very dangerous to their interests if they have a respectful relationship with Iran. But the people, whatever problems people have in Iran, whatever disagreements they have with their government, it's their responsibility to change their system if that's what most people want. It's not the business of the US who runs Iran. It just isn't. But in order to make the case for this hostility, for military action, for sanctions, we're always told it's very bad. The people hate their government. The people hate their government. Women have to cover their hair, always using women to make the case for U.S. interventions and aggressions. But this is a sovereign state. That's the most important thing for people to know. It is not the business of the U.S. to decide who runs Iran, and that is why there's constant vilification. There has to be, because if you just said what I just said, then you couldn't get buy-in for military attacks and sanctions.
So since we're on the subject of the U.S. choosing who can run Iran, I noticed that you posted an interesting comment on your X account a couple of days ago. You said, "Dear fanboys and fangirls of Pahlavi Reza," that's the son, "I now have at least 50 of these emails. Please stop. It's obnoxious, and I don't like your guy anyway. This doesn't help your cause. Just stop." What's that all about, Margaret? What were these emails about?
A couple of days ago, I was on this media list. Of course, if they were really following me, they would know not to bother sending it to me. But this was an email from some the crown prince, as they call him, the Shah's son, who's a loser in his 60s now. But at any rate, somebody has convinced him he can run Iran again. And I started getting these emails from people saying there's going to be demonstrations in this city and that city all over the world on this date. So I get one email, then I get another, then I get another. And it ended up being like more than 60 emails to me and others in the media. And I was like, who is sending these? I was like, could you please stop? Anyway, so I posted about it. But that's an important thing to remember, when we get information that's against the Iranian government, we're told the people, meaning people who've left Iran, are often involved. And they're NGOs, they're funded by the US. So when you're told X number of people have been killed in Iran, whatever the number is, it comes from some NGO located in the US. A US funded individuals and organizations. And this is the kind of thing they do. So it was annoying to me that endless emails to myself and other people. So that's why I posted it.
Here in Montreal, there have been a few protests against the Iranian government. And I happened to be in the vicinity of one a couple of weeks ago, and I plunged into the crowd and started interviewing people, including an organizer. And I found that the people were chanting the name of Pahlavi, this charlatan who's not been in Iran for 40 plus years, and who is clearly a puppet of Israel and Washington. They were praising Trump. They were praising Netanyahu. One organizer told me that there's been a horrible propaganda campaign against Israel, said that Palestinians were faking their deaths in Gaza. I had to take a shower after leaving that protest. It was so indecent. But Margaret, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm curious your view about this. I believe that even if they succeed in undermining and overthrowing the current government of Iran, which I don't think is going to happen, but you never know. If they did that, I don't think they're going to stop there. Whether or not they install Pahlavi or some other puppet, I think they're going to actually try to destroy the country, because this is precisely what they've done to Syria. After Bashar al-Assad left the country, they just continued to bomb the bejesus out of the country. They're trying to partition it. They have a puppet in power in Damascus, by all indications, doing whatever the Americans and the Israelis want, and yet they are taking more land, expanding their occupation, destroying whatever ability to defend itself Syria may have had. Do you see that as being the inevitable destiny for Iran as well, if they overthrow this government?
Sure, this is what the U.S. does. There's still sanctions against Libya. The U.S. and NATO destroyed the Libyan state in 2011, got the president, Muammar Gaddafi, killed. There's still sanctions against Libya. The country's now partitioned, the east and west, a U.S.-backed general running half the country. So sure, and we could, as you point out, in Syria. So yes, if they should succeed, it would not be enough to change the political leadership of the country. And Iran is a huge country, physically large, a big population. It would be more difficult, but with every victory, they get stronger, and their capability of disrupting other countries to this extent. And I have to say this too. Every time they win, I feel uncomfortable using that word, but kidnapping Maduro was a win for the U.S. That Venezuelan oil is now going to Israel. That's something that never would have happened before. And even though the Venezuelan state is intact, they are still, the U.S. is directing their actions, no matter whether they like it or not, whether they want it or not. There's the sanctions, the blockades. Then they use it against Cuba, trying to starve Cuba in submission, deprive Cuba of oil. It's having a terrible effect there. Schools are shut. Hospitals can't provide health care, blackouts. I mean, it's horrible what the U.S. is doing. So first they blockade Venezuela, then they kidnap the president, then they blockade Cuba. And this happened under Biden, lest we forget. These policies are bipartisan. Let me just say that quickly. This war against Syria that went on for like 13 or 14 years. Sadly, it depresses me when I think about Syria, quite frankly. But as you point out, it wasn't enough to destroy the state, to undermine it and hollow it out to a point where the president fled. There was also treachery in Syria. I want to say that too. There were people at very high levels who ended up helping the West. But they go on and on and on. There's never one battle that's enough. It's like, okay, we won this battle, let's go here. Okay, we won in Venezuela, we won in Cuba, we won in Syria. So you're absolutely right. They would have to militarily not just attack Iran, the country, but it would be something very, very devastating. And we've seen what they have done in other places. So we can assume the same would happen there.
Yeah. Just to repeat what I've said before, I think it's so important for people to understand, because there are people on the left and in the anti-imperialist movement who do sometimes repeat lines about the Iranian government, which are used to build support for the destruction of the state. And, as I try to tell them, whether you like this government or not, it is the only thing standing in the way of the destruction of Iran at this particular moment in Iranian history. Who is going to defend the sovereignty of the state and the physical integrity of the state, if not this government at this particular moment? It certainly ain't going to be the Shah's son. I think you'll probably concur with that after your reaction to those emails, Margaret.
Yes, I do, and but what you're pointing out, the importance of being anti-imperialist and not just being on the left. It's important to be anti-imperialist. And if you have an anti-imperialist outlook, then you can't be fooled. You can't be fooled by corporate media. And I find there are very few people who are able to separate themselves from state propaganda, the war propaganda from the state itself, from corporate media. That's why they work overtime to tell you, oh, women are being treated. That's what they love, as if sanctions and bombings don't hurt women. But women are being treated badly in X location, and we're going to help them. So women are oppressed in Iran. Women are oppressed in Iran over and over and over again. These mullahs are crazy. They're executing people. We have the death penalty in the U.S. What are you talking about? Anything, everything. Some things are much of it false or true, but without any context, so that people, unless they're really seriously anti-imperialist, um, will find some way to, if not to defend, not to oppose what the U.S. state does and what Western nations do. So it's very insidious, but it works. That's why they keep it up. But if you're anti-imperialist, you will be opposed to U.S. interference anywhere in the world, and you won't be swayed by years of propaganda that those people are bad, or their government is awful. The more another country is demonized by the US, the more aware you need to be about why that is happening. And so these people who are allegedly leftists, I right now it's like I don't let people call themselves leftists if they're not condemning what the US and Israel are trying to do in Iran. So it's like I don't want to hear you trying to call yourself a leftist, and you allow yourself to be swayed. I guess liberals, maybe that's the better word, liberals. But a lot of liberals, they're easily fooled. All you have to do is use enough propaganda long enough. And I think a lot of these people want to believe in the state. They want to believe it's good. Their country is good. Their government is good. So you don't really have to do a lot to get them to defend these hostile acts, these aggressions against other countries. But if you're anti-imperialist, you can't be pro peace, just anti-war. If you're not anti-imperialist, you will end up defending this stuff.
Absolutely. I think this makes you and me tankies, but I don't really give a damn. So, in any case, I don't even know what that damn word means. So, although I've been called it on countless occasions. So, since we're on this subject, Margaret, of the fake concern for the rights of women, I wanted to talk to you about the spectacle on Capitol Hill this week where Pam Bondi uh, gave testimony about the Epstein scandal. And, sitting behind her were more than 30 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, all of whom confirmed in that sordid spectacle that we all witnessed, that none of them had been contacted by the FBI, even though they had proactively, either themselves or through their lawyers, reached out to the FBI, offering their testimony. And I just want to show our audience, for those who haven't seen it, some of the highlights of this spectacle.
I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer the
theatrics are
question the way I
ridiculous.
asked it.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch.
Reclaim
Not
it?
on our time. No way.
Reclaim
And I
it?
told you about that, Attorney General, before you
We have-
started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I
anything,
did tell you, because we
washed
saw
up
what you did in the
loser
Senate.
Lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order. Time, and I should get back at least 45 seconds.
We will get. But I'm going to ask the victims behind you right now. First, can you please stand up? And then, can you please raise your hand if you think, after everything you've heard today, you feel that our AG, the feds, have your back? Do we have your back? Raise your hand if you're confident that we got your back. And that's the issue, Madam AG. We've got to make sure that victims stand up and report the crimes.
As a footnote, I just want to add one other thing. You may have heard, Margaret, that Catherine Rumler, who was, I think, the top White House lawyer under the Obama administration and later became the top lawyer for Goldman Sachs, just resigned because we discovered that her relationship with the notorious pedophile was not, quote unquote, strictly professional. This is what Goldman Sachs had been saying. And she was referring to him as, sweetie and my favorite Jeffrey. And, he bought her a first class ticket somewhere. In any event, these what I find absolutely amazing is that they're telling us that they want to blow the bejesus out of Iran to liberate the women from oppression. But at the same time, the elite within the United States, in the broader West, of course, this is not just true of the United States, including women who are powerful actors within the elite, seem absolutely determined to immunize these male predators from any form of accountability for what they did to young American women, predominantly American women and women from other parts of the world. I mean, I just find this absolutely mind blowing, Margaret. And you'd think that a female attorney general of all people would be absolutely committed to justice for these victims. What do you make of this spectacle that we witnessed in Pam Bondi's performance as AG on this file?
The hypocrisy with Epstein, the release, even though it's not 3 million pages of documents, is not everything. They have redacted information. First of all, they released it without taking out the victims' names, the sex trafficking victims' names. They didn't care about them. They still have redacted information. I mean, I don't know how many millions of pages there are, but one of the things that I have found amazing is the degree to which wealth and power immunize people. There are so many. Noam Chomsky, other people have, his reputation. His name is mud now, and it should be. The people who uh, um, contradicted themselves, things they claimed to believe in, just to be friends with some rich guy. It could be this attorney at Goldman Sachs. It could be Noam Chomsky. He bought people off. We know now that the Oslo Accords, which were so devastating to Palestine, he literally gave money to the Norwegian diplomats who were supposed to be an impartial people. He paid them money. He left money to their kids. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. So you have women who will be cynical and claim they care about women in Iran, but they're like men. They care about being in power. They care about rubbing shoulders with rich, powerful people. And that's when you find out who has integrity and who does not. And if you have enough money and enough pull, we find out there are very few people who have any integrity. Pam Bondi, I mean, anybody who's a loyalist of Donald Trump is trash anyway. I mean, let's just be honest about that. It was a very crazy hearing. At one point, she starts yelling about the economy. The economy, the Dow has reached 50 jillion or something like that, and that's what we need to know. No, that's not what we need to know. And in any case, people are not doing well in the U.S. But in any case, to work for Donald Trump, and Trump has backstabbed her publicly. A few weeks ago, there were stories in the Wall Street Journal that Trump was telling people that Pam Bondi was weak in order to goad her in case she faltered to do whatever he wanted. If she had any integrity, she would have resigned. Tulsi Gabbard should have resigned. The president, he never forgave her for telling the truth about Iran not having a nuclear capability, and he's cut her out. She's supposed to be director of national intelligence. So he's using her to snatch ballots in Georgia, another weird story. But all of these people, it could be women who won't stand up for women. It could be people like Chomsky who are supposed to be leftists, supposed to care about humanity. But when it comes to power and money and influence, we find that very few people really have integrity. and that a lot of what they say is BS, and they know it's BS. They don't believe in anything that they're telling the rest of us. So it's sad, but it's not unusual and it's not surprising.
Yeah, I think that point you made, by the way, Margaret, about the use of bribes is very salient, because we think that Epstein, the general belief seems to have been that Epstein was only using sticks, but in fact he was using carrots as well. Anything he could do to get powerful people to effectively pursue an agenda that was aligned with Israel, he did. You know, paying people off was going to accomplish that. That's what he did. Now, I want to just go back to your reference to Chomsky, and I was astonished to see this email this week. This is from Valeria Chomsky to Epstein on July 2017. We count you as our best friend. I mean, the one. I just was unbelievably blown away by this. So I want to ask you about this, Margaret, and by reference to something that Aaron Mate said about Noam Chomsky. And to be fair to Aaron, he said this earlier in this whole series of revelations about the Chomskys and Epstein. He said, I'm not going to cancel Noam Chomsky. Now, my own personal feeling about this is, just because I'm, absolutely aghast at the relationship that the Chomskys had with Epstein, that doesn't mean that I'm going to discount everything that Chomsky ever did in his life. And in particular, I've always talked for many years about the profound impact that manufacturing consent had on me. And it was not only Chomsky who wrote that, it was also Edward Herman, but it was really a monumental work, which enlightened me in so many ways. And I'm not going to stop saying that, even though I'm profoundly disappointed in Noam Chomsky. So I guess my point here is that you can express that disappointment, revise your opinion of the man, at least the man in the latter years of his life, without flushing down the toilet everything he ever did. Where do you come out on this? I mean, do you think it's possible to be honest about the really sordid nature of their relationship, while at the same time, recognizing that Chomsky, at least in earlier points of his life, did make valuable contributions to the public discourse?
Well, he did, but it's easier for me because I was not impressed with him. I know every 4 years he tells leftists in the U.S. you have to vote for Democrats. I mean, not that you have an alternative, not making the case, not acknowledging that the Democrats are also, we have a far right party and a center right party. Not even acknowledging the contradictions, just you have to vote for Democrats, and if it's your fault, that kind of scolding. If a Republican wins. So, excuse me, that made me underwhelmed by him. Also, he was against BDS, but now we find out he's meeting with Ehud Barak, a former Israeli prime minister, very person that Epstein was very close to. And so I was not impressed with him that much. I never read Manufacturing Consent. I'm going to acknowledge that he did make that contribution, but I guess in my old age, I'm getting less and less forgiving when I find out these things about people. He also succumbed. He succumbed to money and power. That this man what did Epstein contribute to anything? I mean, nothing. I mean, what did he do aside from spread his money around and buy people off all over the world? He was no one for Chomsky to have had any admiration for. Now, I'm assuming that in order to get people into his orbit, he was charming and inviting and come stay with me. And I loved, maybe he told him, I read Manufacturing Consent. I loved it. Who knows? But the degree to which so many people have been willing to contradict themselves, all to have his friendship and hopefully, his money, which Chomsky got, it's disturbing, even though it doesn't shock me. But to answer your question, I was not a Chomsky fan to begin with, so no, it's not hard for me.
Yeah,
And I don't know what he meant by cancel. I don't like that word. You know, the whole canceling people. I'm not sure what Aaron Mate was saying, but it's disappointing. I mean, I understand what it's like to have an admiration and a respect for someone, and then you find out something about them that is a deal breaker for you, or would be ordinarily. But things like his relationship and others with Epstein are very telling. They tell us a lot about who people really are. And, this email where, Epstein says, oh, people are saying terrible things about me. What should I do? And, Chomsky gives him advice. Poor Jeffrey, here's what you need to do. And then just slams the Me Too movement. I think it's gone too far. Something, I'm paraphrasing what he said. That was especially bad to me, and told us a lot about him. But it also tells us everybody's human. And even people we admire and have good reason to admire, they're still human too, with all the frailties that we can succumb to.
Yeah. I would add to his list of sins, by the way, that he supported the two-state delusion, which was always a fraud. And even if Israel had given the Palestinians a state along the 1967 borders, which Chomsky always advocated for, it would have been an outrageous injustice, because they would have ended up with something like 20% of the territory of historic Palestine, even though they constitute half or slightly more than half of the population of historic Palestine. So now I think that that's the least of his sins in light of what we know. And personally, I will not forgive the man for this. That doesn't mean I'm going to flush his monumental book down the toilet. It still means a lot to me. But in any case, I don't have any sympathy for those who are apologizing for what Chomsky did with him. No. Now, I want to talk to you a little more about the bigger picture about these Epstein revelations, Margaret. I've been seeing a lot of chatter in the social media, and some podcasters are saying that the release of the documents is a psyop, that somehow this is meant to manipulate us in ways that advantage the elite. And I go back, I remember an incident during the financial crisis, which I think bears some similarity to this. You may recall, Margaret, that there was, I think this is before Obama took office, Bush, it was at the end of his second term, there was this big push in Congress for a huge bailout of the banks.
Yep.
And they put forward this legislation, and eventually they did bail out the banks. But the first time they tried, there was so much outrage amongst American voters that all the congressional, sellouts who were inclined to vote for the legislation voted against it, and it failed. Mm-hmm. And my own view is that this is pretty much what's happened here. Public outrage built to the point where Congress had to do something. But again, there are people who think that this is somehow trying to, advantage the elites, the release of these documents. What's your view about why we've been shown this incredibly incriminating material?
Well, I mean, they were forced to. I mean, to your point, there was actual bipartisan legislation to force the release of the documents. So that's why Republican Thomas Massie, who's on the outs with Trump because he dares to speak up about Israel and other issues, he worked with Democrats to make this demand. And also, they were in trouble with their own people. There were Trump supporters because they had used it. It's almost funny to me how during his campaign, Trump used Epstein against the Democrats, using Bill Clinton as the poster child for Epstein, and claiming there was some kind of, deep state conspiracy against Republicans. Because look, Bill Clinton and Epstein. And then it came back to bite them when, and Pam Bondi, speaking of which, during the campaign, she promised that all these documents would be released. And then they get into office, and they're hoisted on their own petard, as it were, because their supporters wanted the files released because they naively thought that it was just something that was going to hurt Democrats. So they were forced into it. I'm not going to say that there's, I know people who say that, Netanyahu has holding them over Trump's head, and, as if Trump doesn't also want to attack Iran or do what Israel wants. And I'm not going to say there's no pressure there. I feel like Israel's a frenemy of a lot of, to use a colloquial expression. But I think it is a damning indictment of the elites in this country and around the world. We see what's happened in Britain. Prime Minister Starmer is in serious trouble, may have to resign, threw his chief of staff under the bus because of his relations, or rather his old boss, Peter Mandelson, who was close to Epstein, a mover and a shaker in British politics, a man who put Starmer into office, who purged Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters from the Labour Party, made sure that Zionist interests were prioritized by Tories or Labour. So it's an exposure of the elites. It exposes not just individuals, but the way the world works. And the thing I hope people pay attention to is how it exposes how undemocratic the supposedly democratic world is. That this guy decides who's going to be a prime minister in England, that he bribed people to get these Oslo Accords enacted, which favored Israel to such a great degree. I mean, these are examples of just examples of some of the other things that, that they revealed to us. So I can't go along with that. I really can't. I think it is it's good for us. It's good for people of the world to see these documents, to get a taste, to get some information about how powerful people stay powerful, the influence they have in our political systems, and how so many people who have an impact on our lives just succumb to them. So I'm very glad it's all come out, because there was a lot of emphasis on the sex trafficking, and I'm not saying there should not have been, but I think it's important for people to know how the elites really work, how our world really works, how undemocratic the supposedly democratic nations are. So I'm glad it's come out, and I hope more comes out. And in case you can't tell, I don't go along with that argument that somehow, there are people who, I don't know if they want to be contrarian. I don't know what it is, who are always looking for something that's just not there. This talk about, yes, there's a deep state, and you don't get to be president of the U.S. without doing what they tell you to do. But this idea that Trump was going to fight the deep state is just stupid. That was ridiculous. This idea that this, or that person is going to behave differently in the world of the ruling class, these people who rule our lives, is just absurd. So I think people need to stop with that. Really need to stop.
I completely concur. I just add that, as a lawyer, one thing that I think you're absolutely correct to point out how these revelations reveal the anti-democratic nature of our governments. But as a lawyer, I also focus on the fact that they reveal that there are two justice systems. There's one where, ordinary citizens who are just trying to scrape together some money can go away to the Hoosgow for years because they sold some pot. Whereas people who are billionaires who are raping minors don't even have to pay a traffic fine, for Christ's sakes. I mean, this is just, it's so astonishing to me how much impunity these billionaires enjoy. And I hope that this brings about an outright revolution throughout the West, not just the United States, because that's what we damn well need.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he got away with this. His activities were known for years. And he didn't end up in jail until, I don't know how, I can't remember what year he died, however he died. But it tells you, just as you said, the The system is rigged. It's rigged against the masses of people. And money and race play this huge role in determining who can or can't get justice, who holds sway, who determines what happens to us. And it's something that should not be forgotten.